When I first heard that I was traveling to an altitude of over 4,000 meters high, I was very shocked, and my physical reaction when I got there was very tense. But despite the stressfulness of having limited oxygen and of it being very cold, it was still a great adventure because of what we were up there to do. I first heard that I was traveling to a plateau over 4,000 meters high. I was very shocked, but slowly I came to realize that even though my body had an intense reaction, what I was doing up there was actually very fun and exciting. So there were two sides to the coin. It was a great adventure. There was actually not much going through my head at the time because, well, it was very hard to think due to the oxygen constraints. I just kept focusing on my task. Actually, there wasn't much going through my mind at the time. Because of the oxygen deprivation, I was more focused on the task than anything because I had a more limited capacity to think. It was an interesting experience observing the giant telescopes, even though I only got to see them for a short time. However, I wanted to finish the task as quickly as possible, given how unforgiving the conditions were. Even though we only saw them for a short time, observing the giant telescopes was a great experience. But I really wanted to finish the task, given the time constraints and the constraints of the environment that were present. I thought executing both the drone plan and the balloon plan at the same time was a reasonable compromise. In fact, Deng's plan of using the balloons turned out to be a better plan. After the disagreement between me and Deng, I thought that doing both experiments at once would be a reasonable compromise. It turned out Deng's plan was actually better. I eventually understood why Deng and Zhao rejected the drone plan. It was just too unrealistic. We were already dealing with so much computerized equipment, and there was a very big risk of something going wrong with the drone, even though it was more easily controllable. Whereas with the balloon, things would be more simple, easier to set up, easier to replace, and easier to maintain. There were many setbacks throughout the task, but I still stayed determined because there was no room for me to have second thoughts given the time constraints. I've always stood close to the principle of perseverance. No, I didn't face any personal difficulties because I've stayed close to the principle of perseverance my entire life. No, I did not face any personal difficulties or second thoughts, as I said earlier. Perseverance is always a principle that I stood by, and I decided to get the task done within the limited time constraint. I thought taping the pliers to the balloon was the fastest method given the limited time constraints. In reality, I wasn't thinking at full capacity, and I realized that it was a very dumb plan that lost us one of our balloons. I taped the pliers to the balloon because it was frankly the fastest method, and I was unable to think correctly, so I thought that, it would be the most efficient way to actually test how much weight the balloon could hold. However, I realized that that would be very dumb because some pliers are over 1 kilogram. None of our balloons could have held that amount of weight. It was a very irrational decision on my part, and it led to us losing one of our balloons. I wasn't worried that the 3D modeling wasn't finished by the end of the night because, well, it wasn't my job to do it, and so if it didn't end up being finished, I couldn't do anything to fix it. I was not worried because the 3D no, I was not worried that the 3D modeling wasn't finished when I left. Well, it wasn't my job to do the 3D modeling anyway, so I figured that if it wasn't done, it wouldn't be my fault, and I couldn't do anything about it. I really was resistant to Zhao's suggestion to just keep going. At that point, when my perseverance was running thin, his streak of perseverance allowed us to push through and get in the balloon right before the deadline hit. It was absolutely one of the hardest experiences I've ever had, but Zhao's assistance really helped me finish the balloon on. I was definitely resistant to Zhao's suggestions because I was very annoyed at him at the time because of the constraints we were working with, how cold it was, and the lack of oxygen. But I came to realize that his perseverance would be necessary if we want to finish the task. I now realize it was a good choice to not have me as the team leader, but instead Zhao, because I would have given up then and there. Felt like I had been set back hours when the balloon's tether was accidentally cut and it flew up into the sky. It was very annoying more than anything, but thankfully, despite that, we were able to finish the project. The balloon's tether breaking and it flying up into the sky was very annoying because I felt like I had been set back hours. But eventually, even though we lost that big chance at a successful flight, we eventually did it despite that challenge. I was very happy about the test flight succeeding, given that the amount of work that we had put in was finally starting to show some results. I was very happy about the test flight succeeding, given the amount of time we spent on the project. It showed that we were finally getting some amount of results. Satisfied enough with my performance, given that the project succeeded in its task. I think that my most valuable contribution to the team was not only the amount of physical work that I assisted Zhao with, but also the amount of new ideas that I added to the team's catalog and the way that I was able to catalyze them into thinking for themselves. 13. I'm generally satisfied with our performance, given that we were able to finish the project in the very limited time constraints. I think that my biggest contribution was helping catalyze the team by introducing new ideas all the time, including the drone idea and the idea of using one big balloon instead of many small balloons. I also helped a lot with the physical work. No, I don't regret not attending the final group dinner at all. I prioritized my physical health and my well-being in a very remote location where it might have been hard for me to get help over something that I could have done at a later date online instead of in person. No, I don't regret missing the team dinner due to my own physical condition. I prioritized my own health and my own safety in a very remote location over something that I could have discussed with them online at a later time. I'm very proud that I was able to endure and complete the project despite having to constantly use respirators, walk around with multiple heat pads, and I wasn't able to run or move too fast. I'm very proud of myself for being able to complete the work despite the extreme constraints which required me to carry around several respirators, lots of heat pads, and prevented me from running or moving too fast. It was certainly a very challenging task. Yes, I definitely feel that my sense of perseverance and strength grew with this trip to Lhasa. I think I definitely grew a little bit from this experience in the areas of my perseverance and strength, allowing me to stand tall against environmental conditions. I think that Zhao and Deng were two of the best teammates that I could have ever asked for. Zhao's perseverance in times of struggle were one of the biggest reasons we chose him as team leader. Even when both me and Deng had left at 10 p.m., he was still working on the 3D model until maybe past midnight. I don't know, I didn't see him. So he was still the most perseverant of all three of us throughout thick and thin. Uh, as well, he also pushed us through terrible weather conditions and forced us to actually focus on the project despite the hard physical conditions. Meanwhile, I think Deng was also a very valuable addition to the team, constantly tempering the big ideas and the ambition that me and Zhao had with more realistic ideas and explaining why our ideas sometimes weren't very realistic themselves. Also, surprisingly, he tolerated the harsh environment of Lhasa more than me despite his physical condition. I think Zhao and Deng were two of the best teammates that I could have possibly asked for, and obviously I couldn't have done it without them. Zhao, especially as the team leader, he really helped us persevere despite the extremely bad weather conditions and the lack of oxygen. He pushed us through the deadline with only a sliver of time remaining in such bad conditions. He also has so much perseverance and he's very hardworking, given that he stayed up till midnight working on the 3D model for the container for our weather sensor, while me and Deng had left 2 hours before. Deng was also one of the best teammates that I could have asked for. Despite his physical conditions, he handled the extremely bad weather conditions of Lhasa better than I ever could, and he still did lots of work despite being constrained more than both me and Zhao. So I think both of them were the most hardworking they could have ever been and contributed just as much to the project as I did.